Okay, so thank you to the organizer for this invitation, and it is my pleasure to moderate this panel about space security and geoeconomics and geopolitics issues, which of course is a very, very huge topic. We have seen this morning, and we still have seen it at the beginning of the afternoon, that security in space is crucial for all the spacefaring nations, but also for everyone on Earth for his daily life. We are trying at this panel to make some evidence and at least to share our views about the different geoeconomics and geopolitics challenges, because space is coming more and more, politically and economically important. So what I want to stress at the beginning is that space is dual by nature. This is something very important because it means that we are not only dealing with military or civilian issues, but we have to share together, to put them together and to think about them in the same way. Cybersecurity does, of course, has more facility maybe to attack civilian satellites and military satellites, because we have seen that the security of one country is really now more and more dealing with its space capabilities. But at least it's also very important for the finance, the business, and even the GPS, the navigation, the Earth observation, telecommunication, all these kind of space services that we are used to have available in our daily life. So cybersecurity is one of the new threats in the field of the space security. We know about debris, we know about potential missile attack from the ground and anti-satellite attacks, but we don't know a lot about security and cyber attacks, which is something very different, according that this attack is driven on the ground segment or on the links between Earth and satellite, or on the satellites itself. So I have the pleasure to have 4 participants to this panel, and I will introduce them by the order of presentation. First of all is Mr. Ivan James, which is chief, I need to have all the good words for presentation, which is Chief Systems and Products Officer at Telespazio, Germany. You have 20 years of experience in the different business areas, including cybersecurity, which is part of your experience. And then you give us your views about the sensibility of space and the big and the large uses of space we may have, and so the question of security. Then it will be General Friedling, former Major General of the French Air and Space Forces, and now the CNO of a startup, which is LookUp Space. And of course, you have the potential to give the both parts of your experience, from the military and public part to the business and the civilian side. After all, you know Clémence Poirier, who is giving the last conference, and Clémence Poirier, after working at ESPI, the European Space Policy Institute, about cybersecurity, is currently researcher at the Center for Security Studies in Zürich. And at the end of the panel, we will give the floor to Dimitra Stefoudi. She is teaching at the Leiden University and the International Space University, and she will make a presentation more about the legal aspect of cybersecurity in space. So I give the floor to Ivan James for the first presentation. You have 10 minutes, and each of us has 10 minutes in order to keep time for the question with the audience. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Isabelle, for the introduction. Thank you very much also to the organizer for also having me on the panel today. It's really an honor to be part of this event and this panel in particular.
You have some slides?
Yes, I have some slides.
Yeah.
I have also here the thingy to control it. So let's see
So
if
maybe
it works.
you can
for
ask.
now. Let's see. Maybe one more. No. Ah, it's working. Okay. Good. So yes, of course, I have strict instructions from my marketing department to show at least one or two slides for the company where I come from. So I'm working for Telespazio, as mentioned, in particular Telespazio Germany. On the Telespazio group level, we are truly a global global company, global organization with over 3,000 employees, as well as working across basically 15 different countries around the globe. We also have over 60 years of experience in the in the market, in the space domain, and of course that is quite substantial. And I think we can say quite a lot of things regarding our experience in the space domain. We are also part of the major group with our majority shareholder Leonardo, who is even more global. So I think we have a good standing in the sense of appreciating the global view of an impact that space and, of course, related to space cybersecurity has on our all daily lives. So, regarding Telespazio Germany, just a very quick note: we are stationed in Darmstadt, that is our headquarters, and we are mostly involved in the work with the institutional clients. ESA and DLR and similar. So this is, I think, just out of courtesy to my marketing department. So what I wanted to touch upon here on a very high level as well is what I call a kind of a space as a global medium. I like this slide very much because it actually shows the kind of milestones and the main milestones and the journey that the space has had still having from, let's say, it major starts from the 60s, of course, with the Apollo missions and going through the foundation of ESA, the foundation of EUMETSAT, going through the ISS establishment, which is another, of course, major example of space being really a global medium and very relevant for geopolitics, geoeconomics arena, absolutely. Then, of course, through the 2000s, 2010s, also forming EGSEC, the common core for the ground segment, which is another monumental collaboration across the industry, across the countries as well. So another, even though more European, but it is basically a global arena activity. And then, of course, going into the 20s, also with the introduction of SpaceX as a major player, going truly global. So I think this is a good way of showing that space is really a global medium and attracts a global, of course, attention of the geopolitics and economics. This is just to show that we as Telespazio were there from the start, of course, from the broadcast of the moon landing towards basically being in all the major activities, all the major missions involved. So I think we also, from our standpoint, we can really share our experience on the global level. Of course, this also shows that the importance of the strategic importance of the space assets. It shows also potential that space can be also treated as a new battlefield, as a new theater of conflict as well. It shows that there are a lot of possibilities, opportunities for alliances, of course, but also for the rivalries as well, as we all know from US and China. So we know this is a great big theater, which basically, of course, also boils down to the national level as well, to the national security. So any breach, of course, and any breach, any vulnerability that is exploited in the space assets can have immediate impact on the national level as well, not just on a global. So this is extremely, of course, from our point of view, coming from being a global player, a very important arena. So another let's say a view that I would like to share is also on the economic side, on the market side. Of course, it's being in the space domain also definitely involves or includes different kind of downstream markets, let's say, or markets in general, be it on the geoinformation side, so coming with the Earth observation activities, satellite communications market, of course, extremely important globally, of course, space flight activities, spacecraft operations, extremely important, as well as, of course, going to the ground, to the digital ground segment. So all of these kind of, let's say, sub-domains, incidentally, of course, we are, as Telespazio, involved in all of these by accident, so that's why I mention it. But in any case, this shows that, of course, on the technology side as well, on the offering side and the market side, we need to be extremely careful in safeguarding these assets as well, because we know that SATCOM is for sure used also quite a lot nowadays in the financial systems. So we know that basically if also this service is exploited, this service is basically down, we have extreme repercussions worldwide on this. Of course, all other activities as well, extremely important, but we need to, and that's why we are also taking cybersecurity or security by design, I think, into integrating into our systems development, as it is for sure an important element. Just one more slide. What I wanted to show is, of course, all of these, to safeguard all of these space assets, which are extremely, of course, strategically important on a global scale. They are, of course, required extreme also number of capabilities, cybersecurity capabilities. These are only here mentioned several of them. Of course, as I think it was already mentioned several times, just on a very high level, trivial, basically a demarcation. Of course, we have the user segment, we have the ground segment, we have the space segment. Of course, each of these segments have their own sets of vulnerabilities, which are, of course, with the coming new technologies and the adoption of new technologies, new solutions, so like artificial intelligence. Of course, these are getting more under scrutiny as well. So we need improvements there as well. We need progress there as well, and of course, not to forget that. To basically, let's say the chain is, of course, strong as its weakest links, and we have a lot of course, links in the whole supply chain as well. So we need to, of course, take care of end-to-end cybersecurity and safeguarding our space assets. Maybe just a message for the end of my couple of slides is that I think for sure let's say to expect really positive effects of the space cybersecurity. Of course, on a global scale, we need collaboration, of course, on different levels within different stakeholders. We need resilience in that. We need integration of different technologies, different methodologies, different actors. We need technological progress, and only by that I would say that we are actually then basically ensuring the economic stability that this space medium brings, and as well as global cooperation. So I think I would end with this.
Thank you for the 10 minutes of speaking. Thank you, Ivan. So now I will give the floor to Michel Friedling to his own views about cyber security in space.
Thank you, Isabelle. Thank you for the invitation on this panel. So like you said, I'm the CEO now of LookUp Space. LookUp Space is a young company. We were founded 18 months ago. So 18 months ago, we were 2 with the PowerPoint. Today, we are 30 in the company. We will be 45 at the end of the year. And we have raised or gathered 20 millions of funding, private and public, to develop a global space surveillance and safety solution based on radar technology, plus a digital platform that is able to fuse data from diverse sensors, sources. So it's agnostic to the data. So you can see that in my current job, I have a huge problem with securing the solution against cyber threats. But I would like to come back on taking my previous hat and respectfully to my successor, General Adam here, to come back on the subjects, which is geopolitics, and I would like to come back on the war in Ukraine. Clémence described very well what happened since the war in Ukraine. I would like to come back on the war in Ukraine. It's hybrid and integral war. Hybrid means we have military and non-military courses of action, direct and indirect courses of action. We have the combination of strategic intimidation, large-scale disinformation, influence, conventional and non-conventional military operations, non-state actors, special forces, and of course conventional forces. It's also an integral war and maybe total war, not a global, but a total war, which means that we have high-intensity warfare. We have international humanitarian law violations, war crimes, and crimes against humanity or humankind. We have global consequences on energy, food, inflation. European Union and NATO are strengthened by this war, and we have the consolidation of the China-Russia axis. We have non-alignments on many countries not willing to support Ukraine against the aggression, and this war is deployed in all domains, which we call the multi-domain and multi-fields, if you will, war. It means air, naval, ground, cyber, space, plus information domain and fields. So, but what the Ukraine war showed is that space is the first place with the cyber domain where it starts. And actually, we know that CYSAT, we mentioned CYSAT, but I would like to come back a few seconds on this. The very first act of the aggression of Ukraine was in orbit. Not in orbit exactly, but at least against capabilities in orbit on the night of February 24 to 25. So we had this cyber attack against CYSAT. So 30,000 ground terminals were neutralized in 45 minutes with collateral damages in France. Tens of thousands of subscribers to Nordnet were cut off from the internet. In Germany, 6,000 wind turbines were also cut off from the net, representing a capacity of 11 gigawatts. According to an official of the Ukrainian cyber agency, it was a huge loss of communications for the Ukrainian government and forces, the attack against Viasat. And following this, we had a communique from the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency of the US, plus the FBI, saying that they were aware of possible threats to US and international satellite communication networks. And they were alerting in order to strengthen all the cyber security for suppliers and customers of these networks. So this is something that is very important. So what we learned from the cyber operations in Ukraine, and I refer to the hearing of the cyber commander of the French forces. The first lesson is that the cyber attacks are very quick. It's lightning fast attacks, but they require a very long preparation. You have to know the target before launching the attack. They are very low readable, so very often not easy to attribute. And what we saw in Ukraine is that it started long before February 2022. It started actually in 2014 with very high-level attacks against targeting infrastructure, critical infrastructure like power stations in 2015. In 2017, diversification of the attacks. And that had, as a consequences, an in-depth reform of the Ukrainian government, a strategy in 2016, a budget for cyber defense following that, the creation of an agency like the French ANSSI, cybersecurity law in 2017, creation of a cyber policy force, or police, cyber police force, and support from Western countries, including in the US, with the military support from the US Cyber Command to prepare to repel these attacks from the Russians. So this is something that means that we have an in-depth defense against the cyber attacks. And I would like to mention one figure. I cannot tell you if the figure is robust, but it's something that is known. In 2022, there were 4,500 attacks, cyber attacks against Ukrainian forces, infrastructures, government, and so on. So this is something that we take into consideration very carefully at LookUp Space, like I said. So we have taken this by design since the beginning of the development of the platform, our Synapse digital platform. And this is the reason why we partner with CYSAT, organizing this event, to bid for a call of a project of France 2030 to develop the hardening of the, and to address some technological locks about hardening the middleware of our digital platform. So we won this project, so we are now developing this solution with CYSAT. And again, I think this is paramount because, like Isabelle said, all our infrastructures and capabilities are dual use by design, by nature. So we will be targeted one day or another.
Thank you very much. So Clémence, now, if you want to present.
Thank you very much. So first, I think the topic of this panel is geoeconomics and geopolitics. And sometimes we use the word geopolitics a bit for everything. So I think you're a professor in geography. I think it's important to remind what geopolitics is. It's the power rivalry on a specific territory for a specific territory. And of course, all power rivalries, they're not necessarily geopolitical. But for this to be, stakeholders, they fight for influence, control, sovereignty over a territory. And that territory, of course, it can be in space or in cyberspace. And you're going to tell me, okay, what does that have to do with cybersecurity? But if we have a bit of a prospective look, and we do strategic foresights, which I guess is something that the Space Command is doing. We can look at it and say maybe in the future, in the orbital environment, it's not so crazy to think that states and companies will eventually fight to control or occupy some part of outer space, whether it's specific orbits or specific altitudes in Earth's orbit, Lagrange points, or even the moon or beyond. And we can go into specific scenarios or examples. So maybe they look a bit far-fetched, but that's something that we need to do if we want to prepare for future attacks and to understand why cybersecurity is important for geopolitics. So, for instance, we know that the orbital environment can only fit a few large constellations because of the physical space available in orbit, because of debris, because of spectrum, which is a finite resource, etc. So maybe it's possible that states or companies will fight to have their constellations, even if it means that they have to deny others their right to have theirs. And one of the ways to deny your adversary from occupying or using some parts of Earth's orbit without creating damage for your own constellation or your own space operation is cyber operation, because cyber operation, they rarely create debris. So you need cybersecurity to protect your constellation, you need cyber defense to protect from others, operators' attack, and potentially offensive capabilities if your doctrine allows you to do so, to deny others or occupy some part of space. That's something, if there's a conflict in space, that's maybe a plausible scenarios. Another example is that if the orbital environment becomes very crowded and some states may want to conduct some cyber operation against adversary satellites whenever they approach or cross each other, to prevent eavesdropping or information gathering about their own system, then again, it's really geopolitics because it's about control over a specific area at a specific moment. And you need cybersecurity and cyber defense, otherwise you will be impacted. Another example is that if occupying or controlling Lagrange points becomes essential to exert power over Mars, then launching cyber operation on your adversary, which is located in this area or maybe control this area, it may be useful either to proceed with your exploration mission if they're occupying this area and you would potentially need their authorization or them moving from those points to go through. So that's geopolitical rivalry. That is really about territory, and then cybersecurity, cyber defense is essential to protect your systems. If there is a moon rush, a bit like a gold rush, to occupy or control the moon, and eventually actual fights on the moon to control some area, you will need cybersecurity and cyber defense to protect your systems. Otherwise, you will not be able to advance with your exploration mission or your permanent presence on the moon. And cyber offensive operation, they may freeze your advancement. And if there is a lunar internet or if there is 5G on the moon, like Nokia wants to deploy, for instance, you need cybersecurity to ensure that everything functions and communication work with Earth. But whoever controls internet network on a territory basically end up controlling this network in some ways. So it would be the same for the moon. If you control this 5G or lunar internet, you also exert control on the moon. So that's again geopolitics. So that's also why you need cybersecurity and cyber defense. So okay, of course, those scenarios look a bit far-fetched. But if we zoom out and we come back to more realistic geopolitical rivalries on Earth, and geoeconomics and economic warfare and so on, cybersecurity is also essential. If you do not have cybersecurity and cyber defense to protect your space sector, you will be targeted by cyber attacks. Other countries will steal your intellectual property and use it to advance their own space program, and you will not have the tools to fight your own geopolitical rivalries on Earth anymore. So if there's a conflict on Earth and you use Earth observation to assess the situation impartially and make decision, but your satellite is not secure, then your enemies may attempt to maliciously modify satellite images and trick you into the wrong decision. So of course, strategic autonomy, it's very important also for the data, as you mentioned. So if you rely on technological blocks of other nations, you lose control over your data and your system. So that's also why, for instance, you have two separate internet connection on the ISS, on the Russian and US modules, because it's deemed essential by these two countries to control the data and to control the connection. So that's maybe a few examples, but it really shows how geopolitics and cybersecurity can be connected.
Thank you. I think it's interesting, and we may have some discussion on some of these points. So, Dimitra, if you want to give us a final presentation, and then we will ask questions.
So I can hear myself now, thank you. Thank you very much to the previous speakers as well for painting the larger picture on how technology, market, geopolitics function in our discussion today. I will pick up from here and maybe mention a few legal issues, because I'm often the only lawyer in a discussion about cybersecurity in space. I don't know if that's the case also with our audience here today. It's a little too bright to see, but often this means that it's a little difficult to explain why we have, and in fact why we need regulations in this field. And it's not difficult because operators want to escape compliance, but because the regulatory language and the technical language do not always coincide. If you look into regulation, you're going to see that cybersecurity is often described in a very similar way across documents, and in a way that is narrow enough or broad enough depending on how you read it. We usually speak about the ability of network and information systems to withstand risks against their availability, confidentiality, and integrity. Whereas if you go and ask people with a technical, commercial background, they're going to describe cybersecurity with a specific activity in mind and with the highest possible safety standard in mind. So I would like to make perhaps this remark to start my presentation, that the technical and the legal considerations in our discussion do play a specific role. And I would also like to recall two takeaways from this morning opening statements from the President of CNRS, from the Director General of USPA, who spoke respectively about the strategic autonomy, but also for the creation of a competitive ecosystem. With this in mind, and with my legal knowledge that I hope proves useful here, I want to address specifically the question why space cybersecurity is important for geopolitics. It is important because countries and regions make it important. It's other geopolitical reasons that lead them to adopt cybersecurity regulations and space cybersecurity regulations, but they do make a step forward in this regard. And this brings, of course, importance to the matter of cybersecurity. We have talked a lot this morning and this afternoon about the EU Space Law, the NIS2 Directive, the Critical Entities Directive, many European countries, Germany, UK, France, bringing cybersecurity into their national space regulations, or space cybersecurity into their national regulations. But we see examples from other parts of the world. Japan has a very elaborate framework on space cybersecurity. The US has a very specific policy. And this is one of the reasons countries do think this is important. In turn, this affects, of course, where operators establish their activities and how they operate there. Another reason for addressing cybersecurity, space cybersecurity together with geopolitics is because for the geopolitical reasons that we mentioned, we have to rely on space technology. That has been made very clear in our discussion so far. But we also have to rely on cybersecurity for complying with other international and national obligations. Every state has to authorize and supervise its activities in outer space. This is why a lot of countries issue licenses. And to do that, they have to make sure that their activities are conducted properly. Having a cyber secure system and maintaining it this way is a means for conducting your activity properly, and this is why a lot of countries are turning their attention to that. And similar is the case also when we're speaking about damage happening in outer space or on the Earth as the aftermath of a cyber incident. If you have two satellites colliding and one of them collided with the other because of a cyber attack, then this will bring cybersecurity compliance into that very specific framework. A third, perhaps a final, at least to me, reason for discussing the importance of space cybersecurity in geopolitics is the level of cooperation among countries. Because we cooperate very much, definitely around Europe, also around the world, especially in certain regions and between the specific group of countries, it is important for all of us to be on the same page. Here in Europe, we do make steps in this regard by introducing not only the EU space law, but also the two directives that do not deal specifically with space. One is on cybersecurity, the other one is on critical entities directive. But compared to their preceding regimes, the NIS directive that is until October 2024 in place, they did make an addition, they did make an improvement to include a specific sector-specific provision on space. With that said, we have already understood how fragmented space governance is around Europe, so we certainly need a more streamlined regulation, hopefully in the form of an EU space law. That, however, should come timely without unnecessary delays and should coordinate the activities that are already happening. As far as the geoeconomics are concerned, and this is certainly a topic that we do not often discuss. Geopolitics is also a very, very nice buzzword. Geoeconomics, I had to do a little bit of digging to understand the geo in the economics, but I have interpreted it in a way that connects the activities of states and private actors in cybersecurity and how this affects their economics depending on where they are around the world. And I was thinking that eventually countries, private actors become targets of cyber attacks because of their economic role. That could be one aspect of geoeconomics and cybersecurity in space. Another one has to do with the many challenges in complying with a very complex, sometimes cybersecurity regime, which eventually brings some disruption in the economics when we're speaking about compliance on behalf of bigger companies that definitely have the expertise and the resources, and smaller companies that may not be able to reach the same level playing field. That said, though, when we have a framework that requires all actors to comply, we do come closer to this competitive advantage if we do have a cybersecurity regulation in Europe by implementing the NIS2 directive, by implementing the Critical Entities Resilience Directive, by seeing the EU space law. We create activities around Europe that are safe. They can become a brand, and this way place Europe in the geoeconomics field. I would like to conclude my brief interaction here by two remarks from my side and maybe open it a little bit to questions for us or discussion in our panel. What I would like to stress is that we definitely need synergies, not only between various companies in the space cybersecurity supply chain, but also between the different disciplines. Lawyers, engineers, marketeers, scientists have to speak the same language. It will definitely change the landscape of our discussion even here today. The other remark that leads to a question is that we all want the same thing. We all want safe systems. We all want to comply with whatever regulation comes our way. We all want streamlined regulation. Why does this not happen, though, is a question that maybe we can address in this panel, because I sense it has to do with some geopolitics or geoeconomics. It must not be as simple as adopting an EU space law, because we would have done it already, right? Maybe with that, I leave it to our discussion further. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have 15 minutes for the questions and answer. I'm supposed to have the question on the screen, but I don't see it there is no questions. That's fantastic. That's strange too. Well, if there is no question, I may share some of my own thought, and then you may think about what you want to ask. In fact, if we speak about cyber, what we see is that we have a number of risks, different kind of risk. And one of these risks is the loss of control, because you don't know exactly what may happen to your satellite and to your services, which is something quite frightening, because you really need to be in situation to control your satellite every time. So I think this kind of risk is, oh, thank you, I see some question, but I finish my sentence. So there is a part of risk, and I'm not so sure, and we may discuss that with Clémence after, that a kind of war we may have, or the kind of fight we may have in space, is on the same nature of the war and the fight on Earth, because space is a really different medium. But the problem is that cyber is not so different applied to space than applied to Earth's system. So I think that maybe we have to think about the cost of cyber, because if we need to improve cyber security, and everybody agrees here on the fact that it's necessary to improve this cyber security, we need to have to pay something for that. And it's very difficult, because for some kind of customers of space, I mean, for instance, the scientists, they don't want to pay too much, because especially for the CubeSat satellite or these kind of things, any extra cost is too much. And if we consider that they will not take the kind of precaution to keep this system out of any kind of cyber attack, it may become a danger for all the other systems. So we really need to have a strong effort to make people conscious of the risk of cyber attacks, not maybe directly, but at least indirectly. And I think that it's also the issue of how much it costs to do that, and this is a question for the companies and for all the software actors. So you can see the question, it's on the screen. Which implication happening in the context of a conventional war? Okay, who wants to answer on the panel?
Maybe I would like to react on the on what you said, Isabelle. I would like to say that I don't agree with extra cost is too much. You know, it has a cost, but it has no price actually, because you're going to save your capability, you're going to save your systems, you're going to save the services, the data you have from these capabilities to serve the community, defense, civilian, commercial, health, agriculture, whatever. So it has a cost, it has no price. And again, this is the reason why we put some money in LookUp Space, to make sure that our platform, our capability, but I'm saying the platform, but also the radars deployed around the globe, which have on the very same location, digital processing, you know, edge computing and so on, are protected and hardened against these threats.
Maybe, Dimitra, you want to answer to the law and kind of contradiction?
Thank you for asking the difficult questions. As far as the implications of cyber attacks in the context of conventional war, I think we can see that more in the facts of what's happening rather than the law. You rightly point out that it seems that no specific consequences attached. It seems, because we do not necessarily pursue the attribution of consequences. If we would like to do that, if, for example, after a conflict, during a conflict, at any point leading to a conflict, one state, those are issues that are raised usually between the states, not between operators or from an operator against the state. But if a state would like to bring up the fact that a cyber attack or another cyber incident violates international law, that would be possible. The big problem would have to be to explain what international law has been violated, because there are many avenues to connect cybersecurity with international law. One would be to connect it with the prohibition to use force, but that would only cover very large-scale cyber attacks, maybe attacking directly a satellite. It may not cover the disruption of signal. This is why it's important to have binding cybersecurity regulations, because if you are the operator of the object that performed the cyber attack, and there is a regulation that tells you in thicker lines, do not conduct such an attack, then it's very easy, much easier, not very easy, much easier to prove that you have violated an international law. It will be easier to find who is behind that, so to attribute it, and by that hold someone accountable under criminal law, international humanitarian law, and so on. But this is another reason why it's important to have something binding and something that's more specific, that says something about cybersecurity, prohibiting it, and so on.
And something interesting too is you may have a political aspect and not only a legal one, because naming and shaming is also something you can use. Absolutely. And it may be efficient to some context and to some kind of attacks, of course. And also something different is that in cybersecurity you don't only have states, you also have, of course, criminals. And so this is not only something which is linked to spacefaring nations and the competitivity of this spacefaring nation, but it's also can be applied to everything, every kind of actors, which is important. So the next question is to Clémence specifically, so it's easier for me. I know to who ask the question. Moonrush, do we start to take into consideration the cyber threats for current and future main space structure?
Yeah, there's already some requirement and specifications from NASA for lunar internet and for Artemis program. So there are definitely requirements that are being set up right now, and this is very important because compared to old space programs where cybersecurity was added after the program was built and planned for, here, this challenge is to integrate security by design, security from the beginning of the program, because we know that's how it's best efficient. And that's how you budget it also to ensure that you talked about cost. It's like you need to plan this and integrate the cost. What the challenge is going to be interoperability, because with the Artemis Accords, for instance, you have several states, different systems, different providers all over the world, so different jurisdiction as well, from manufacturers where things are being produced, supply chain issues, and so on. So it's going to be kind of coupling all those actors together, because it's not just NASA that is going to build things, it's commercial actors, it's commercial actors not just in the US, but also all around the world. So that's going to be the challenge, but this is considered already, so that's already a good step.
At least by the United States, because we also have to think about China and Russia, who also are interested to go into the moon. And maybe it's also interesting to remember that on the moon we will have some Wi-Fi and some Internet of Things and navigation in order to be able to use automatic systems. So this all are also some weakness that we have to deal with. So I don't know if there is, oh yes, sorry, one more question. The growth of such cyber attack in state conflicts, low again. What internet can a state attacked by a private hacker? Well, I'm not so sure that it's only about the space security and cyber security. I think it's a huge question about any kind of Ivan, do you want to say something, or not specifically?
I mean, not of course, from the legal basis. It's difficult to to really answer this, especially international legal basis, which is obviously, as Dimitra said, very very complicated and complex system. But of course, we've seen this. I mean, private hacker groups. Yeah, I mean we've seen this with CYSAT as well. Basically, even though it's still unclear who actually did, but I mean we've seen this for sure. It's happening. To be honest, I have no real concrete answer to this, other than, as also mentioned, I mean, we need to work on the basically we need to work on the operability. We need to work on the early warnings. We need to work on prevention. We need to work on defense, cyber defense, basically to try to mitigate this as much as possible.
Dimitra, something else or about the Corfu channel case, which
I
is
will
not well known by anybody, maybe?
I will try to summarize in a minute what could take perhaps a week to properly address. Due diligence is definitely relevant, and it's actually the due diligence of the state that has licensed the satellite that may suffer a cyber attack. That is because it's extremely difficult for a state or any other actor to go against any private hacker group and see where they are, what they're doing. But this is exactly the purpose of cybersecurity frameworks, whether they are binding laws or something similar, to invite countries, because it's the countries that license satellite systems and ground stations in outer space and on the Earth. And it's these countries that can make sure that you have the proper level of safety, security, resilience, however you would like to call it, to be able to withstand such an attack. It is going to happen, but if you have this framework, it may be easier to find the private hacker, to find who is wrong, and to start a legal proceeding.
Thank you.
Maybe just a few words. This is typically what we call the gray, hybrid war, like I described at the beginning. So non-conventional courses of action led by non-state actors. And this is always very difficult to attribute and to retaliate against this kind of actions. So what is done mostly until now is name and shame when you can. When you can at least attribute or identify the author of the action and make a link between this group and a state. Most of these non-state actors, not most, but some of these non-state actors are paramilitary actors, also in China, in Russia, for example, but maybe not only. And the other thing is that we don't know exactly what is going on under the surface of the water, but I guess that there are some counter actions against these actors as well, from government actors as well.
Thank you. Clémence?
Yeah, exactly. It's also a question in the sense, if you're in a state of armed conflict, then international humanitarian law applies, for sure. But then in each country, the interpretation of how international humanitarian law applies to cyberspace is different. So at what point do you consider that a cyber attack is an armed attack? At what point do you consider that a cyber attack is a breach of your country's sovereignty? And here you have different doctrines between countries. So, for instance, for France, it would be the doctrine of penetration of systems. So from the second you have a penetration in a French network, then it's considered a breach of sovereignty. Whereas the UK, they would say, no, the attack needs to reach a certain level of damage and impact so that we consider this a breach of sovereignty. And so it's all those questions, it's really interpretation, and so it's very hard to understand. So I think it's really important that states publish their view of how they consider international humanitarian law applies to cyberspace. It clarifies at least things. So I think it's a very tricky questions, and we can take weeks to discuss them.
And about tricky questions, we have the last one, which is a nice tricky question, if you want, maybe even to answer to what
great.
We can say about HEI to hack system.
So, yeah, I don't think we can see the question anymore, but I think everybody's seen it. So, yeah, I mean that's of course the hot topic for sure, or one of the hot topics lately. So I think there we have kind of two parallel approaches that we need to consider. One is indeed the use of AI to basically hack or to basically get on the offensive. And the other one, of course, is the use of AI on the defense as well, basically to also kind of detect the anomalies and detect the, let's say, behavior which is not normal, so abnormal behavior as well, and to detect the actual and mitigate the actual attacks. So we, of course, we're seeing these two parallel, let's say, streams going hand in hand for sure. Absolutely. So, I mean, this is, of course, also getting into the, let's say, the area where we know that there is that the space, let's say, technologies are still at, let's say, kind of, I wouldn't say old-fashioned, but they are, let's say, not yet in the most edge, and they are getting there for sure, and that so far it has been a closed system, so to speak, really a closed system. And now with the new space economy booming, all the new technologies being basically integrated, involved. So these are all basically getting the system that was closed is getting exposed now to many different vulnerabilities for sure. Maybe some of them were already, I would say, in the kind of a classical IT domain. Maybe they were already resolved, but these are new for the space domain for sure. And of course, use of AI is it's I mean, an extremely nice playground for for this kind of activities to have success, of course.
Thank you. So now we are coming at the end of the panel. So thank you to all the panelists for your presentation, and thank you to the audience, and have a nice afternoon. Thank you.